At my sister's wedding, my parents stood in front of 50 guests and demanded that I hand over the keys to my penthouse as a gift. When I refused, my mother slapped me so hard the sound echoed across the marble floor. Everyone froze. I didn't fight back. I just picked up my cufflink, straightened my jacket, and walked out. Then I made a single phone call. An hour later, a woman walked into that reception, and when my mother saw who it was, she screamed. My name is Lysander Kane, and this is not just a story about a wedding. It's about family betrayal, about being treated like I was invisible, and about the moment I finally drew the line. I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reached. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if my story touches you, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Your support means the world. It tells me my voice matters, and maybe it helps someone else who's living through the same pain. It was 11:52 a.m. when the room turned on me. Fontainebleau's chandeliers threw shards of light across the marble, and the Atlantic glittered through the glass like it was in on the spectacle. 50 people, give or take, leaned toward a single microphone. My father, Vincent Pierce, tapped his champagne flute the way he does before he signs a deal, smiling like he'd planned the sun itself. Lysander has agreed to gift his Brickell penthouse to Willow and Logan, he announced, voice smooth, the kind of smooth that only comes from rehearsal. For a beat, I thought I'd misheard him. Then the applause detonated. Uncle's aunts, a line of business partners trying to look like family, a handful of my colleagues who had no idea who I was to these people, and Miles, the groom's brother, phone up live streaming this theater to strangers. Willow pressed a hand to her chest and warbled, "Really, Zeph?" And for a second I almost believed the innocence on her face. I stood. No one discussed anything with me. I never agreed. The sound in the room shifted like a tide, reversing a hiss of confusion and offense. My mother, Lillian, reached for the mic with a speed that would have impressed an athlete. "Give them the keys. Don't shame this family," she said, smiling for the guests while her eyes cut me open. "The penthouse is my property," I said, slow and clear, each word a rung on a ladder out of a familiar pit. "I do not consent." Willow's chin trembled theatrically. Logan, the groom, offered a soothing smile that asked me to be small. The aunts found their moral outrage. "Family first," Margot chirped. Tucker muttered something about me needing a wife to fix my attitude. A partner from one of my father's projects leaned to another and whispered not nearly quietly enough, "He probably leases a shoebox and calls it a view." The ridiculousness almost made me laugh. It didn't. Lillian didn't wait for any of it to land. She moved 3 strides across marble, the mic still hot in her hand. "Keys," she commanded, breath loud in the speakers. I didn't flinch. Then the slap. A sharp crack that ricocheted through the ballroom, amplified by the sound system, wrapped in the gasp of 50 witnesses. Pain flashed, white precise. Something small pinged against the floor and skittered my platinum cufflink, the one engraved Jakarta 2024. The one I bought after I closed the $50 million deal that everyone in this room pretends they don't know about. I didn't touch my face. I bent, collected the cufflink between 2 fingers, and fitted it back into place. The small click sounded louder than the slap to me. I looked up and straight into Miles's phone, into thousands of eyes that weren't mine to control. The room held its breath like a single lung. "Congratulations on your wedding," I said, voice flat as scalpel. "I'm leaving." I stepped away from the table, past Vincent's frozen smile, past Aunt Celeste's pinched disapproval, past 2 of my colleagues who stared like they were at the wrong screening. The chandeliers burned ice on my shoulders. People parted for me because they didn't know what else to do. In the doorway, I heard my mother again, not words this time, only the animal sound of someone watching a script burn. The hallway outside was cooler, darker, modern art running down the walls like timelines of other people's compromises. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized long ago for this exact moment. "Green light," I said when she answered. I heard Elena Navarro replied, calm as a metronome. I turned back to the glass and saw the ballroom reflected like a movie, my mother collapsing into a chair, my father's jaw slipping off the hinge of his performance. Willow cradling a bouquet like it could cradle her mess, and on Miles's screen, the viewer counter sprinting upward as if outrage itself had legs. Rewind to 7:30 a.m. Same day, same hotel. The air still cool from the night and the ballroom stripped to scaffolding and cables. I arrived early because that's what I do. I arrive before anyone expects me. I pay for what no one will thank me for, and I make sure things work. The room smelled like white orchids and starch, and rows of tables in gold cloth waited under ladders and light rigs. I met the band manager by the stage and settled the outstanding balance for the live set and the menu upgrade lobster, not chicken, $60,000 all in. He shook my hand like he'd shaken a lot of grateful hands. The gratitude never made it to my family. Lillian appeared inventorying with her eyes and gave me a once-over that found offense in a Tom Ford Navy suit. "You look like you're headed to a shareholder meeting," she said. "It's a wedding." Vincent drifted in a minute later, checked the seating chart like it was a term sheet, and tapped the spot where my name sat discreetly far from the Pierce table. "Don't start reorganizing things," he said. "We're not at work." I nodded. It's amazing how much easier nodding gets when you've spent 10 years proving yourself in rooms where no one nods back. I walked the perimeter unobtrusive until the walls had ears. A technician adjusted a speaker near the side hall where the AV station hides. I paused within sight of my parents, and their voices threaded the half-light. After the speeches, Lillian whispered, "We announce the Penthouse. He won't make a scene. He never does. He'll behave." Vincent agreed like he was talking about a dog who'd finally learned to heel. I stood still and let the words pass through me. Anger is a flare. I've learned to breathe until it becomes a pilot light. My phone buzzed. A message from my assistant with a photo taken minutes earlier from my penthouse terrace Biscayne Bay poured out in sheets of silver skyline standing like it belonged to me, which it did, and a caption I didn't know I needed. "Your fortress awaits, boss." I set it as my lock screen and watched the image click into place. Fortress is a romantic word for a building, but it fit. Past the stage, a door marked Tech opened into the AV booth, a narrow cave of cables and screens. On the main monitor sat a slide deck titled Willow plus Logan Reception. I scrolled curious until my chest tightened. Our new home in Brickell, the slide read, and there in high resolution was my living room, the exact angle from my last architectural shoot. Below the photo, generosity of my brother Willow's speech. Not a placeholder, not an idea. A finished thought waiting for a microphone. I took a picture of the screen, time-stamped it, and forwarded it to my assistant without comment. When I stepped back into the ballroom, a planner intercepted me with a white envelope and a rehearsed smile. "This is for the key ceremony," she said. "We'll cue you after the toast." Inside the envelope, a velvet box molded in the shape of a key embossed with my name. It would have been funny if it weren't so precise. "I didn't order this," I told her. She frowned, checked her clipboard, then pulled up the invoice on a tablet. Purchaser Lysander K. Email lysander.kane event, something that wasn't a domain anyone uses. Mind sending me that, I asked. She did. I forwarded it too with a single line, "Find the source." As if summoned by the scent of resolve, family drifted over. Aunt Margot clicked her tongue. 30 and no ring, Lysander. "You work too much." "I never promised a house," I said, quiet enough to almost pass as a thought. "Family comes first," Vincent added, passing behind me as if he'd just invented the phrase. "Boundaries are part of family," I said, and didn't mind that he kept walking. The room filled, the orchids warmed into sweetness, and I let the logistics wash over me, the clink of glassware, the thud of bass during a sound check. A planner teaching a junior how to fold a napkin into something that looked like advice. I could have left then and avoided what came later, but leaving would have meant admitting there was a negotiation left in me. There wasn't. My assistant called at 9:18. Got something, she said. The email was created 2 days ago from an IP block registered to Pierce Properties. The name tasted metallic in my mouth. My father's office, his network, his insistence that I was paranoid when I asked him to keep family and business separate. "Document everything," I told her. She didn't need me to say it. I walked to the terrace doors and looked out at the swath of blue where tourists were already laying out towels. Miami pretends at ease better than any city I've known. Inside, the ballroom hardened from potential to inevitability. The band ran their last chords. The decorator set the key ceremony envelope near the dais as if it had always belonged there. When Willow floated through in a silk robe to check the flowers, she passed the AV door without glancing, and for a moment I let myself believe she didn't know. Then I remembered the slide in her deck with the word generosity, and my living room, and belief fell through its own trapdoor. By 10:30, the room had transformed into the version you see in magazines, gold-white sea glass light. I tested my cufflinks, both snug, both engraved, then straightened my jacket one last time. I found my seat far from the Pierce table, close enough to an exit to feel honest about it. My phone vibrated again with the lock screen Biscayne bright and impossible, and I smiled at the private joke of calling a penthouse a fortress, at the private promise that I would treat it like one. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was how loud a boundary can sound when it finally lands in a room built to silence it. But I knew enough. I had proof, I had a plan, and when people who raise you insist you owe them what you earned, planning is love for yourself. At 11:40, the guests began to arrive in earnest, business partners in summer suits, cousins who judge as a hobby, colleagues of mine who still think I'm an analyst because I never corrected them. Miles framed angles with his phone. Lillian surveyed her kingdom. Vincent shook hands like he was stapling goodwill to the table. I sat and breathed the cufflink cool against my wrist, the word Jakarta pressing into my skin like a reminder that I didn't build my life by accident. By 11:52, there was only the mic and my father, and the sentence that tried to conscript me. The rest you already saw. By mid-morning, I had retreated to the hotel's private lounge, a quieter floor above the chaos where the walls were paneled in pale wood and the windows opened onto the Atlantic. The air was salted and still. I spread my phone and a stack of printed contracts across a low glass table, scanning them the way I used to scan term sheets at 2 in the morning. My cufflinks glinted against the PDFs as though reminding me of who had earned them. In the compensation agreement I'd signed last year, Clause 15.3 was underlined in yellow: anti-coercion. It stated in legal prose that the penthouse awarded to me could not be transferred under pressure from family, social expectation, or public demand. It was the kind of clause most people skim over. I had insisted it be there. I dialed Elena Navarro. She had been my mentor for 5 years, and though her tone was always steel, it had become the closest thing to reassurance I had. She answered on the second ring. "Are you in position?" she asked, as though this was a negotiation rather than a wedding. "Yes," I said. "If they force me in public, we use green light." There was a pause, then her voice softened into something I rarely heard. "They will overreach. When they do, they give us the opening. Let them. We'll shine the light. If I have to light it up," I said, "I'll burn every bulb." After we hung up, I called my assistant. She was already at her desk across town, dashboard glowing with feeds and alerts. I told her to build a capture net, scrape any live stream that might surface, stamp it, archive it, make sure it could be admitted as evidence if lawyers needed it. "Already started," she said. "Miles is broadcasting everything. Viewer count is rising even before the vows." She called back 20 minutes later, her voice threaded with disbelief. "You should know Pierce Properties sent yet another request for a meeting with Elena this morning. It's the 8th in 8 months. They attached a draft of a good faith agreement. It includes a line about leveraging the personal residence of Lysander K as a symbol of family unity." The words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just about humiliating me. My father was trying to borrow the image of my penthouse to patch the holes in his balance sheet. "File it," I said. "We may need it." I stared out over the water. From here, Miami looked clean, the horizon uncomplicated. But the truth was sliding into view. They didn't just want my property. They wanted the leverage it represented. I asked for confirmation of something else I had suspected. Elena, discreet as ever, had bought into Pierce Properties in a previous restructuring. 40%. Enough to call a board meeting within 24 hours if she cited moral turpitude damaging shareholder value. My parents had no idea. They thought they were circling a wounded animal, when in fact they were tethered to the one person they couldn't afford to cross. I kept that knowledge folded inside me like a hidden card. If they tried to shame me, it would be the pivot they never saw coming. Around 11:00, my phone vibrated again, this time from the building manager at Brickell. He told me my mother had phoned that morning asking how to add a new resident to the private elevator list. She had pretended she was confirming logistics. I instructed him to lock down the system, refresh the whitelist, deny any new entries until I approved them personally. I hung up and let the silence press in. It was one thing for them to imagine the penthouse as their prize. It was another for her to physically prepare to move into it. I leaned back, breathing evenly, my mind sharper than it had been all morning. I had contracts, allies, digital surveillance, and a contingency strong enough to withstand their theater. The helpless son they remembered was gone. If I had to walk alone into that reception, I would, but I would not be walking unarmed. At 11:35, I stood, buttoned my jacket, and pocketed my phone. The lounge doors whispered shut behind me as I walked the carpeted hall toward the main floor. Just outside the ballroom, I saw a velvet box embossed with my name placed neatly on a small stand beside the podium, the key ceremony waiting like a trap. Light from the chandeliers poured over it, turning my name into a spotlight. I closed my phone, steadied my pulse, and stepped toward the storm. By 12:15, the ballroom had transformed into something glossy enough for a magazine spread. Gold cloth covered the tables, orchids glowed in crystal vases, and the chandeliers threw their rain of light across glassware that hummed with expectation. Jazz curled through the air as servers topped off champagne. 50 guests arranged themselves into neat lines of loyalty and curiosity. I felt the weight of their eyes even before the performance began. My father stood, lifted his glass, and tapped it until the room fell quiet. His smile was the kind I'd seen him practice in mirrors, part businessman, part patriarch. "We are blessed today," he said, his voice carrying like an orator. Then, without hesitation, my son Lysander has chosen to gift his Brickell penthouse to Willow and Logan as their first home together. The room erupted. Hands clapped, voices cheered, relatives leaned into each other with looks of approval. Willow pressed both palms to her face as though overwhelmed. "Really, Zeph?" She gasped, her performance polished enough to make half the room believe it. Logan's laugh was careful, straining to seem grateful without inviting more conflict. I stood. My chair scraped against the floor and silenced the closest tables. "There was never any discussion with me," I said, clear, steady. I did not agree. Gasps rippled, confusion breaking against the chandeliers. Whispers swarmed. Willow's tears appeared on cue, sliding down her cheeks as she shook her head. "I thought you wanted me to be happy," she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Logan wrapped an arm around her shoulder, murmuring, "We'll take good care of it," as though the property already belonged to them. Lillian snatched the microphone from my father's hand. "Hand over the keys right now," she barked, her voice ringing through the speakers. "Don't disgrace this family." The air thickened. Miles stood at the edge of the dance floor, phone lifted high, capturing every frame. My own screen buzzed in my pocket. A message from my assistant. "It's trending already. Thousands are watching." Margot rose from her seat, voice sharp. "Family is everything, Lysander. You should know better." Tucker leaned back with a grin, adding, "If you didn't work yourself to death, maybe you'd have a family of your own." Their words mingled into a chorus of condemnation, the kind of pressure designed to crush anyone who still believed approval was survival. I inhaled once, twice, steadying myself with the memory of Clause 15(3) etched into my mind. The penthouse was mine, protected by law and earned by blood and hours they never saw. I reminded myself they could shout, but they couldn't rewrite contracts. Across the room, one of Vincent's partners leaned to another and muttered, "If he really bought it himself, fine. But my bet, it's debt." The comment sliced through the hum, landing sharp in my ear. Their doubt was the story my parents had curated for years, that I was all appearance, no foundation. I felt the sting, but my hands stayed loose at my sides. My eyes swept the room. A few colleagues of mine seated far from the Pierce family exchanged glances. They knew who I was, what I had built, but they kept their silence. No one risked being the lone voice against a tide. I looked back at Lillian. Her breath fogged the microphone as she glared close enough now to close the distance between fury and flesh. The room pulsed with expectation. Champagne untouched music cut off 50 hearts leaning toward the collision. Her hand trembled just enough to give away her intent. The microphone buzzed, her chest heaved, and in that frozen second before impact, I understood the choice she was about to make would carve our family into before and after. The ballroom felt smaller now, as if the chandeliers had lowered themselves to press down on me. I straightened, voice cutting through the stale applause that had died seconds earlier. The penthouse is my property. I do not consent. My father slammed his glass on the table. Selfish, he barked. You're ruining your sister's day. His face was red not from drink but from the fury of losing control. Willow lifted her head, eyes wet, but what glimmered behind them wasn't innocence, it was recognition. She knew this would happen. Her voice trembled just enough for the audience. I thought you wanted me to be happy. The guests stirred. Some nodded at my father's outrage. Others lowered their eyes, unwilling to take sides. The air swelled with judgment, and it was mine alone to carry. Then my attention snagged on the velvet box at the podium. The key ceremony prop had been opened. Inside was a real key, unmistakable, identical to the set I kept in my pocket. My stomach clenched. Someone had taken one from me before today. Who had gone that far into my life? Miles lifted his phone and swung the camera close to my face. My features, tight with restraint, were now broadcast live to thousands of strangers. My phone buzzed against my leg. A message from New York friends. What's happening? Miami is watching you. I inhaled slowly. There was no hiding anymore. Laughter snapped across the room. Aunt Celeste leaned back in her chair, eyes sharp as glass. Please, she scoffed. He probably rents a shoebox. Penthouse. Don't make me laugh. The words sliced deeper than the slap I hadn't yet received. They had built an entire mythology around my supposed inadequacy, and here it was voiced in front of people who mattered to their reputations more than mine. Logan leaned toward me, still holding Willow like she was fragile porcelain. His tone was gentle, almost conspiratorial. If you really don't want this, talk to me later. Don't make a scene. His eyes said something different. Don't ruin the performance. His words weren't about me or about the truth, they were about preserving the illusion. Rage swelled hot and immediate, my pulse pounding, but I kept it leashed. They wanted me to lose control, to confirm the caricature they had painted for years, the difficult son, the selfish brother, the man unfit for family. I clenched my jaw, swallowed the fire, and stood straighter. If they wanted to strip me bare, I would let them, but I would not break. The noise of the room swirled into a storm. Whispers, accusations, moralizing. Somewhere a glass shattered. I was a lone figure in the center of their circus, lit by chandeliers and judgment. My mother moved toward me, microphone still hot, her breath heavy against the speakers. She raised her hand. The ballroom held still as though the entire world anticipated what came next. And then the crack. The sound of her palm against my cheek exploded through the speakers, rattling the crystal. The microphone clattered to the floor. For a moment there was no music, no voices, no movement, only silence thick enough to suffocate. Every face around me was pale with shock. I stood frozen, not from the pain but from the enormity of what she had just done. The silence after the slap was worse than the slap itself. 50 guests stared, their mouths slightly open, their phones buzzing with alerts they didn't dare check. My cheek burned, but I refused to lift a hand to it. Instead, I retrieved my cufflink from the marble floor and slid it back into place. My fingers were steady. The act was deliberate, louder than words. I picked up the microphone. My voice carried low but absolute. Congratulations on your wedding. I'm leaving. I set the mic back on the stand and walked out with my spine straight. My steps measured every movement, defying the chaos behind me. People gasped. Some raised their phones to capture my departure. The ballroom no longer held me. In the corridor, the sound of my phone vibrated through my pocket. Notifications stacked in endless succession. The live stream had exploded. 10,000 viewers and counting. A hashtag formed in real time: Miami wedding slap. Strangers across the city were dissecting my humiliation, but I didn't feel humiliated. I felt awake. As I passed 2 hotel employees whispering by the service door, I caught their words. He came in a Bentley. He's not what they said. Rumors spreading fast, already rewriting the story. The image my parents had tried to staple onto me was unraveling. I stepped into a quiet alcove, pulled out my phone, and dialed. Green light, I said when Elena answered. I saw it, she replied. The video is everywhere. I'm on my way with counsel. The line went silent except for the certainty in her tone. The balance of power shifted in that instant. Another message from my assistant arrived seconds later. The text made my pulse hammer. The key in the velvet box was real. Security footage showed Willow entering the AV room earlier, tampering with the setup. My sister hadn't just been complicit, she had engineered it. The proof was already in legal hands. I touched my face. The sting was still there, a reminder carved into my skin. But my mind had never been clearer. My family had crossed the last line. There was nothing left to save, no bridge unburned. I walked down the hall to the glass doors that opened onto a balcony overlooking Miami Beach. The sunlight crashed over the ocean, dazzling and merciless. Below, the sand glowed white and the water glittered like broken glass. I let the heat wash over me and felt the resolve crystallize. My phone buzzed once more. A message from Elena. 1 hour. Be ready. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and gripped the railing, the city sprawling below like a chessboard. The next move was mine. There was no turning back. The room had curdled into whispers and side glances by the time the doors opened again. Afternoon light spilled in like a spotlight and cut a path across the marble. Heels clicked in a measured rhythm. Elena Navarro stepped through in a black Chanel dress, hair, pinned back eyes calm and exact. 2 attorneys flanked her and a junior assistant carried a leather folio thick with documents. Conversations died mid-syllable. Glasses hovered in mid-air. Even the band half-packed to leave froze with their cases open. I didn't move. I let the silence do the introduction. My mother was the first to find her voice. No, she said, not a word so much as a refusal. No. She rose, then sat, then rose again as if the floor had turned to water. My father's hands trembled on the back of a chair when recognition finally crawled across his face. 8 months of unanswered emails and rescheduled invitations were suddenly standing in his daughter's reception hall dressed like a verdict. Elena didn't take the mic. She didn't need it. Good afternoon, she said, her voice carrying with ease. My name is Elena Navarro, CEO of Kane Ventures. A ripple ran through the room. Heads turned toward me. Mr. Kane, she continued, nodding, serves as our Vice President of Strategy. He led the Jakarta expansion last year and our recent initiatives in Singapore and Tokyo. She let the facts settle where the gossip had been. The contrast was surgical. My mother lurched toward the nearest ally and found none. My father attempted a smile that didn't make it to his eyes. This is a family matter, he said, reaching for diplomacy that had saved him in other rooms. With respect, Ms. Navarro, perhaps. Elena lifted her folio and unfolded a contract sleeve. Clause 15.3, she said. The residence at Brickell awarded as compensation is expressly protected from transfer or reassignment under familial or social pressure. Any attempt to coerce, announce, or otherwise compel a gift is a violation of Mr. Kane's rights and subjects the coercing party to civil remedies. She paused. And given the presence of investors and partners here today, such conduct may rise to the level of behavior detrimental to stakeholders. A hush settled deeper than the last. A few guests slid their phones lower to their laps to capture more discreetly. I stood beside Elena, hands at my sides, face composed, letting the weight of simple sentences do what shouting never could. Then she laid down her next card. For transparency's sake, she said, Kane Ventures currently holds a 40% stake in Pierce Properties through a prior conversion. In the event of continued misconduct or refusal to correct the public record, I am prepared to call a special meeting of the board within 24 hours to consider leadership remedies. An apology and retraction within 48 hours would be prudent. The words struck the room like a bell. My father's eyes flicked from Elena to me and back again, searching for an angle that wasn't there. My mother shook her head, lips moving soundlessly. Someone near the back exhaled an oath. The taste of cheap triumph didn't appeal to me. What I felt was relief, the kind that arrives when the truth puts its hand on your shoulder. Elena nodded to her attorney, who stepped to the AV stand and tapped a laptop awake. The projector flared to life. We'll keep this brief, the attorney said and cued a short clip. The timestamp was early morning. The camera above the side hall looked down on the door marked Tech. Willow appeared in the framed silk robe, hair and rollers, glancing both ways before slipping inside with a white envelope in hand. The video paused on her face as she placed a velvet box on the podium and adjusted the slide deck. A murmur rose, then receded like a wave. I heard Logan's breath catch. His family stared at him as if he had authored this too. Willow stood motionless, a bouquet wilting in her grip. Across the ballroom, Miles's live counter jumped. People announced numbers to no one in particular, 20,000 watching, then more. "This will be the wedding Miami talks about for years," someone whispered, not unkindly. A few guests set their glasses down with small, decisive clicks. One of my father's largest partners stood smoothing his jacket. "In light of this," he said, not raising his voice, "we'll be pausing our transaction until your governance is clarified." He nodded at Elena, then at me, then walked out. 2 others followed. The vacuum where my father's certainty usually lived became visible. I didn't gloat. I didn't move closer. I simply met my father's gaze and held it. He looked at me like a man who'd misread every chart and now saw where the line truly bent. My mother slumped into a chair, the rage gone, the performance finished, only fatigue left behind. Willow's tears finally came for real when Logan stepped back from her and stared at the floor. I felt Elena's presence beside me like a steady column. For the first time today, I wasn't a lone witness to my own life. I didn't have to explain. I didn't have to argue. Standing still was enough. My father turned, voice roughened into something raw. "You've destroyed this family," he said, and the sentence sounded like he believed it. I let the quiet widen until it could hold exactly what I meant. "No," I said. "You and Mom did that yourselves." The room exhaled with me. A songbird of a woman in the corner started crying softly for whom I didn't know. The light caught the crystal in a different way. The afternoon kept moving forward with or without their permission. That night, the city burned with light as if nothing had happened, but inside my penthouse, the silence carried its own weight. Biscayne Bay stretched out black and endless skyscrapers shimmering in its reflection while I stood at the glass wall with a glass of water in hand. My cheek still burned faintly from the slap, though the sting was nothing compared to the clarity that followed. The phone on my counter pulsed with messages, friends, colleagues, strangers, all of them witnessing the collapse I had lived through for years. I let it buzz. I wasn't ready to answer anyone. Vincent called after midnight. His voice on the voicemail was stripped of authority. "Tell her to stop," he pleaded, meaning Elena. "Tell her to let this go." I deleted the message. Minutes later, Willow's text appeared. "You ruined my life." I stared at the words, thought of the video proof of her setting me up, and set the phone face down. No reply. Some sentences deserve silence. By the next morning, the fallout was undeniable. Pierce Properties had lost 5 contracts in a single day. Logan's family postponed their honeymoon, citing the need for clarity. Miles sent me an apology for live streaming, but the genie was already out. News anchors replayed the moment frame by frame. Hashtags trended across platforms, turning our family's manipulation into public spectacle. I didn't feel shame. I felt a strange relief, as though their mask had finally been ripped off in a way I could never have managed alone. A hotel bellman holding the door open for me that night paused before speaking. "Sir," he said quietly, "nobody should be treated like that by their own family." I thanked him. His words from a stranger with nothing to gain landed heavier than the cheers or jeers inside that ballroom. 6 months later, the noise had settled, though the scars remained visible. I had been promoted to senior vice president, my salary raised, my voice respected in rooms where strategy shaped futures. Kane Ventures honored me at our annual event, and I added my own contribution to a foundation for men recovering from emotional abuse. Vincent issued a public apology crafted by lawyers, and Pierce Properties shrank under the weight of its own mismanagement. Lillian raged online until the comments called her what she was, a mother who built her image on control. Willow's marriage dissolved within 3 months. Her last message to me read, "Are you happy now?" My reply was simple. I kept what I earned. That's different. The video passed 1 million views, then became part of the endless churn of online content, though its impact lingered. Forbes invited me to speak, not about the scandal, but about boundaries, integrity, and the courage to walk away. I spoke plainly. I didn't need to dramatize what was already written across my skin. Now each morning I stand on the terrace with coffee warming my hand, the horizon painted gold as the sun climbs over Biscayne. My penthouse is quiet, my fortress intact, not because of locks or glass, but because I drew a line no one else could erase. Success, I've learned, isn't something you owe to anyone. It is proof that you chose yourself and kept choosing even when it hurt. And every sunrise I choose again.